to another episode of Quarantined Coaches. This time we are in the Northeast at the University of Maine with head coach Nick Derba. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm just hanging out in my new office, which is also my kitchen.
Nice.
So, everything's all right. How about yourself?
I'm not too bad. We can't complain, right? Where in Maine is the campus?
So campus is in Orono, Maine, which is roughly 10 minutes north of Bangor. If you grab a map, we are smack dab in the middle of the state. So people think that Maine is a tiny state, but it's actually pretty large. But we're right in the middle of the state of Maine.
And how cold is it there right now?
I think it's about 40, 45 right now.
And this typically would be the middle of the season, right?
Yeah, and we're playing in this, and it's kind of funny because I'm originally from New York, and played some pro ball, obviously down south and whatnot. When I first got up here, and then my first winter, I was like, it's pretty cold. Now I went outside this morning. I was outside like 6 a.m. It was like 35, 38 degrees, something like that. I was outside in a light sweatshirt going, this is beautiful weather. I think it's really all relative. When I 35, 38 degrees when I was living in New York and going back and forth between Florida and here, I was like, 35, 38's cold. Now all of a sudden, you kind of get used to it a little bit,
Well, I know you guys have some Florida kids on the roster there also. I mean, but that's got to be one of the initial roadblocks when recruiting, right? Like, oh, Maine, and a kid thinks that's where Santa Claus lives, that it's just there's polar bears and penguins there.
Right.
How do you get a kid past that initial roadblock to actually be able to tell them about the school?
I think, from my personal standpoint, when I'm speaking to guys, it really comes down to number one, we have the indoor facility. Okay. So first and foremost, when it's the coldest time of the year, which is usually early spring, we're indoors, we're practicing, in our dome. And then, we're traveling, right? We travel a lot. We play a lot, like any other Northeast team, where our first 5 weekends are somewhere that's warmer. The kicker is that we usually, we're going down to the Carolinas or Florida, wherever it might be. Half the time we're playing, it's not 80 degrees, even wherever we are. We were down in the Carolinas, for our first 2 weekends. It was still, like 40
I
degrees.
saw you down here. We were still bundled up, I feel. That was a chilly day when you were playing at Winthrop.
Yeah, it was cold and rainy. And we're like, hey, like, this is like, it is what it is. But, I think that for us, our Miami kids or our Southern guys, when they first get up here, they're like, hey, it's really cold. I tell them, hey, make sure you pack a parka, have a good winter jacket. The winter doesn't really hit here until probably early December, maybe middle of December. So we'll be practicing outside as much as possible up until that point. And then when guys go home, the winter starts to come. This was a pretty mild winter. We were outside in January and February, not for extended periods of time, but we were outside. And, when we're, you get used to the cold, that's the craziest thing is people think, hey, it's going to be 38 degrees or 30 degrees or 25 degrees. I'm not going to get used to it. You really start to realize like that 35 degrees or 40 degree weather, when you're out there playing, it feels really good at times.
Right. What's the selling point to get a kid from, say, Miami to go to Maine? Like, that's a long ways away. There's a lot of schools in between Miami and Maine. What is it that's drawing them up there?
So, listen, the first thing I tell everybody is we are a geographic outpost in baseball. There is nothing around here except for the University of Maine. So people might look at that and be like, oh, my goodness, I'm never going to get home. First and foremost, if you're playing Division I baseball, you're not going home at all. Right? I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. It is a full-time job as a Division I baseball player. I went to school at Manhattan College, which was literally 35 minutes from my house. I didn't go home unless we were, until it was August after summer baseball, and then winter breaks. So you don't really go home that much to begin with. But I truly believe that the University of Maine, for the right kid, Okay, I do think it's a special kid that needs to be here. You know, there are major advantages to our location. We are the only Division I school in the state of Maine. Okay, we don't have any large market professional teams. Okay, the closest thing is a couple of D League basketball teams, and there's the Portland Sea Dogs, who are, I believe, might be maybe moving out of the state of Maine. But other than those two programs, the Division I program, University of Maine, is the only thing that we have here. So you really get a big feel in a small town school. So obviously, we're community driven. People do care about what's happening at the university. And then the fact of the matter is, because there's not a lot to do here, you have zero distractions. We're here, and my big thing is we run this thing like the University of Maine business program, in the sense that we are here to go to school, play baseball, and get better off the field and in the community. And that is our goal. And, I want guys that come up here and say, you know what, Derbs, this is where I want to be. The cold doesn't matter to me, because at the end of the day, when we go down and play our southern school in Maryland in early March, it's still cold,
Right.
and we haven't missed a home game. We can't lost a home game due to cold or snow, at the University of Maine in my 7 years here. We may lose to rain, but we're not losing games. We're playing, we're outside, and if you want to be a professional baseball player, you better learn how to play in the cold as well, because if you're when you're getting out there in your early season, unless you're out some different places, you're gonna be seeing some cold weather.
Yeah, and you don't get to choose where you go either when you get to the pros.
Right.
So, like, is there a certain kind of skill set that would transfer well into cold weather baseball versus maybe, hey, I see these things this kid does, but that won't really play well in the weather we play in? If that makes any sense?
No, that's the thing. It's like, I get this question all the time. Is it going to be, especially from pitchers, is it going to be harder for me to pitch there? Well, for me, I actually think it's actually an easier avenue to pitch, because if you don't have the right mindset as a hitter and you're able to throw strikes, you're going to have a lot of success, because guys are going to, fastball in the hands. You're talking about, some guys are going to shy away from it because it's cold. From an offensive standpoint, I actually believe that you have the ability, if you're a goal-driven guy and you have the mental aptitude to grind it out and just say, hey, I'm here, I'm going to compete, you're going to do well in the cold. You're going to do well with the same skill set and the same mental focus as you would have anywhere else. But the big thing is that you have to be bought in to what we do here as a culture, because the cold for me is not an excuse.
Right. Are there any certain adjustments that need to take, what kind of adjustments need to take place if it is that 30-degree, night game versus your 70 or 65-degree afternoon game? Like, do pitchers need to adjust, their grips, or like, even if it's just what is there anything that changes when it's cold in terms of like actually being out there? Do you run less because guys' hamstrings are tighter? Like, I don't know. I'm just throwing crap against the wall here.
It really comes down to doing what you need to do. So, I mean, I've had guys that, I've played with guys and seen guys that at 90-degree weather need to wear a jacket. And I've seen guys that, are in 35-degree weather, and if they put a jacket on, they're too hot. It comes down to your personal preference of what you need to do. Our game plans, our game doesn't change according to what the elements provide. If you're, a few years ago, you're down in Gainesville, and playing UF, and it's 41 and cold and rainy. You don't change your game plan because the weather pattern.
Right. I mean, do you feel like your location puts you at a disadvantage for recruiting, or gives you an extra hurdle that maybe a lot of other people don't have to deal with?
I definitely think that it does provide as a hurdle. I can safely say that. But when you start to get the right guys, and I believe that we've really started to get there, when you start getting the right guys that truly want to be at Maine, you stumble upon a real perfect storm, because there is a pride factor that goes along with walking out, representing, a very winning program. Traditionally we got 7 College World Series, 120 something professional players. We've run out a lot of professional players in the last 10 years. And when you start to talk about where this program has come from and where what you're representing, and you get on the field and you see guys across the dugout bundled up in jackets, and we're out there in short sleeves and we're going, let's get it on. I truly believe that this is that you have a team that is willing to fight, and that is something that I pride myself on. And I provide pride our staff on, and what we do as a program is that it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you got, on the other side of the lines. If you throw punches, we're going to throw them back, and we're here.
I kind of feel, I think I am feeling a little bit of what you're saying. I mean, do your boys play with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder? Like they're almost just naturally kind of disrespected because they're from Maine and it's a cold weather state and this isn't a baseball state? I mean, do you guys kind of play with that?
Yeah, I think we do. I like to think we do. We talk about carry on a tradition and building your own personal legacy. When you walk out of these doors, the University of Maine, there's a couple of things that I demand, I hope for. Okay, number one is that you have reached your talent level in the classroom and on the baseball field, right? So you hit your talent ceiling. You've done everything possible. The second thing is, I always, I want guys to understand that I want them to call me in 20 years to say, Derbs, how we doing? How's Ben? How's Megan? How's so-and-so? And have a conversation. And the third, this is probably the biggest one, in cooperation with the first, is that I want to see our guys leaving the University of Maine with a legacy and carrying on a tradition that's been since 1964 and probably even before that. But 64 was our first College World Series appearance. You come here, this is so much more than just an individual. And that's huge.
So what would you say, you're talking about, the right fit and the guy, they need to want to be at the University of Maine. What is it about a player that might be, something that you look for that's different than every kid out there that I want to play at? I want to play Division I baseball. I want to get after it. Like, what is it? What's something unique about a player you're looking for?
I want to see a kid that really likes to play. So that may seem like, well, every kid, every person that's sitting there going, oh, of course I like to play. The kid that I want to see is the kid that's in the dugout, that's talking, having fun playing in the right way. The kid that takes a bat at bat and has a little bit of emotion about it. Okay, I'm not looking for stone-faced, professional, quote-unquote professional guys. I want to see guys that actually have some emotion on the field, that run every ball out no matter what. It could be a pop-up to the pitcher, a 20-foot high pop-up. I want to see a guy playing like his hair's on fire and that actually wants to be on the field. And when you start, and you can see those guys, you have guys that run hard but are still going through the motions. I want to see the guy that if you take baseball away from them, they are not the same person.
Can you identify that by watching them play on the field? I think it was yesterday when I was talking to Coach Kenny at Georgia that we were kind of talking about this, seeing the personality on the field, and how kids are almost told how to act, right? And you mentioned that professional thing, act professional. But like at some point, don't you want to see a kid get pissed off and throw his helmet down when he gets into the dugout in the corner? Like, not obviously across the field, but you like to see that fire, right? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, people talk about being professional. Like I've played at every level of professional of baseball except for the big leagues. Okay, so I never played the big leagues. I did some spring training stuff. I saw a lot of really good players that didn't fail much have emotion consistently, whether it be positive or negative, there was an emotion to them because they were, like it's human nature. And I do think that, it was professional in the sense that it wasn't like smashing water coolers and throwing it onto the field, but there was something about, they had success, they celebrated it.
Right.
They had some failure, they dealt with it, they let out some emotion about it, and they moved on.
What was your moment of, did you ever bash a water cooler? In your professional career, what was that crazy moment?
We should probably listen. We should probably go to another
Give
question.
us the PG
If
rated version.
if any of my ex teammates that were there at that moment saw this thing could blow up on Twitter feed. But all I'll say is, I did have a massive meltdown in a playoff game in A-ball that resulted in an ejection, and I mean, it was not professional by any means, and I think that I may have said choice words to every single umpire on the field from the dugout.
So you were
Right? So,
on the bases.
oh,
What
I mean,
position did you play?
I was a catcher.
Oh, you're allowed to be like over the top as a catcher. That's the
Yeah, but
position.
this is like something you would have seen in, in a movie, like
Everybody's
comical.
Everybody's gonna pause the video right here and they're Googling Nick Derba freak out on baseball fields. See if they can
I don't.
find it.
I think I'm lucky in this one. I don't think it was we were getting our game streamed or televised at the time. So
I've seen some crazy ones. I had a kid. He's a good friend of mine now too, which is the crazy thing. At the time, I didn't know him. We were in high school, and it was like a JV game. We were 9th or 10th grade, and the umpire called strike 3, and like the kid just flipped his shit, and he started cussing out the umpire. The umpire's like, this game's going to be over. They're trying to pull the kid back. Then he chucks his bat against the backstop. Threw his helmet on the field. The umpire called the game. Like, it was one of the craziest things. We're all like, wow, this kid's batshit crazy. We go to college. He's like, he turns out to be one of my best friends, and we're talking about our high school baseball lives. And I'm like, holy shit, that was you.
It was you.
Yeah. All right, back to some developmental stuff. I've heard coaches say that being forced indoors, they feel like is good for them developmentally. Like they're forced to work on a lot of skills as opposed to rolling the ball out and saying, let's go take some IO and let's chuck it around in inner squad. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think I listen, I'm going to tell you right now, I would love to be outdoors more often. There's no doubt about it. All right. So if anyone tells you otherwise, I think that, you're lying. But the one thing that it does force us to do, being indoors, is that we have to really kind of get down to the nitty gritty. So like, we may go take batting practice on the field, but we're not taking batting practice on the field, every day, in the sense that when we're in, late November and we're in the dome or we're in our cages, we may be working on certain skill sets that are a little different, and I think that one thing that I do like about working indoors is that it really focuses you up to actually get a feel for barrel, from an offensive standpoint. From a pitching standpoint, your bullpen regimen basically is the same all, time and time again. And luckily with the dome, we can still get our long toss in. But from offensively, it really makes you focus on small things, obviously the bunting, hitting runs, slashing and such, but it also makes you really take some time to understand barrel awareness, because we don't have the elements and we don't have like necessarily feedback, where you're like, hey, you got a good gust to your back to center field and you're popping balls out in the park. But in reality, without that 10-mile-an-hour gust, they just pop up to center field. That feel good BP may not really be that great for you. So I do think that that's a major a positive for just from the offensive side.
Do you see things ever on the field during games where you're like, damn, if we can get outdoors more often, that would never happen to us?
So here are the two biggest things that I think, one is fly balls. Okay. One is fly balls, which happens early on in the year. And then hopefully it
Get
goes
it
away.
figured out.
Right. And usually it does. The biggest one, which I think is the most underrated skill in all of baseball, is base running. Because we're not necessarily able in the early part of the year to take BP and run the bases. I am a major stickler for base running. I think that it is a lot of times the difference between being a championship team and being a runner-up or a third-place team. So that's for me, the biggest reason why I'd like to be outdoors more is just for sheer base running, being able to practice base running, see fly the ball, and really work on your turns. Now, in the dome, we can actually run the bases, but you can't get your reads, and what we talk about in Maine, I don't, if I'm coaching the base or whoever's coaching the bases, I'm not running the bases. It's up to you to make certain decisions. If you can see the ball, you make the decision for us, and that's really the hardest thing to be able to teach indoors.
We talk about this priority checklist for recruits, right? To make sure that they go to the right place. Like, what's important to you? Because you as a coach, you don't want your time wasted. So you don't want a kid coming to you just because you're a D1. You want them to really think about everything else. So, how far should weather be up on that list of priorities? Is it a legitimate reason to just totally ignore schools in the Northeast or the Midwest or the Northwest?
I think that, to make it easy, no, I don't think it should be. And that's not because I'm sitting here I'm not biased. I mean, maybe I am a little bit biased, but I don't think that weather should be a real deciding factor in the top five, when you're really looking at schools, because let's be honest with ourselves. If you're really, really good, okay, you're a top 5 round pick, you're probably not making enough money in professional baseball to live the rest of your life. Okay. Like, realistically speaking, you're going to be one of the, if you make it to the big leagues, great, but you're probably gonna have to find a job afterwards. So number one, the experiences that you had in college, those are important things. I mean, I'm only back here coaching college baseball because of my experience in college. So I think that number one, you should always be looking for the academic solutions. Okay. I'm always very much a student first, athlete second. So, you should find a place that is fitting for you academically. And that's number one. Number two, find somewhere that your level is going to be competitive in. Okay. If you're a D1 player, you're a D1 player, and there's a lot of different avenues to go within Division I. So obviously baseball is a fit. The other thing too is, going and chasing after a huge name sometimes isn't the best thing, in my opinion, because those guys are really good, right? I'm not saying you're not good, but what I'm saying to you is that the only way to get better at baseball or anything is to actually do it. So you have to look at playing time. If you're sitting there going, listen, I'm really good. I'm a draftable kid. I can go to X school, and maybe if I get, crack the lineup a little bit as a freshman or as a sophomore, I might be in every day as a junior. But you start looking at some other schools and you're going, what, I'll play every day from day one. Like, I got a chance to become really good in 3 years. And those are things that people have to kind of look at. I'm not knocking anybody. It's really comes down to what you got to do and what you think is best. But chasing bumper stickers is sometimes not the best thing to go.
Love it. I've never heard that one, chasing bumper stickers. But it's something that I talk about too. Like, everybody, any serious college baseball player, probably any college baseball player that is going on scholarship to a Division I school, in the back of their mind, wants to play this game at the next level, right? Like, they still want to keep that dream alive. And I tell kids all the time, I go, do you know the only thing you have to do in college, or the one thing that everybody has to do in college if they want to get that chance to the next level, is you have to actually be on the field. Like, not on the team, on the field doing things. Because, you could speak to it. How big is the minor league system? How they're willing to give kids $600 a month, right, to play a rookie ball season. I mean, you talk to that for a second. Like, how many opportunities are there in pro baseball that kids just don't understand?
So this is the first thing I'll tell you. This is the number one piece. This is the first piece of information I got from Mike Schilt, who Mike Schilt is now the Louis Cardinals. Okay, so Mike was my hitting coach when I was with the Batavia Muck Dogs, and he said to me, or he said to the team, "I want you all to know, professional baseball doesn't start until you get to Double A." Okay, so that's the first thing that stuck in my head. He said the first thing is professional baseball doesn't start to Double A because Double A is where you only have one team. Okay, right? So think about that.
Yeah, yeah.
All
true.
right. So you got all these levels that have to get bottlenecked into a 25 to 27 man roster in 4 levels of play. So, and I remember sitting in that first locker room with kids from, second rounders from Arkansas, first rounders from Gonzaga, and then me, and then Division II and Division III guys. So there was a total, just everybody's there. High school draft picks, junior college draft picks, and every year there's less and less until you get Double A, Triple A, whatever it might be. There are a lot of really good players. The worst players that I played with in pro ball were exceptional college players. But like you said before, they all played every day.
Right. That's the key.
They played every day.
That's the key. Definitely. Coach Derba, I'm happy that we got to meet in person before this quarantine, first of all. But I appreciate you coming on here today. I think it's really important, the educational piece that kids and families open their eyes, because I know as a South Florida guy, when I hear of a Maine or a Vermont or whatever, the first thing we think of is, oh man, I don't think I could play in the cold. And they need to be educated that everything you just said, if they didn't listen, then that's their fault and they should quit baseball. So thanks for coming on, and I really appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Thank you, and be safe and best to your family.